common axiom is that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Another axiom is that we sweat in peace so that we don't bleed in war. Here at the Marine Corps Association, we fully understand both. That is why we offer through our professional development page on our website a comprehensive catalog of battle studies, tactical and ethical decision games, and war games to ensure that not only do we learn from the past, but we embrace the thoughts and decisions that influence the outcomes of some of the greatest actions of the Marine Corps. We have tools and techniques that will enhance both unit training as well as enable comprehensive self study. Check out all that the Marine Corps Association has to offer on our website. Go to mca-marines.org/professional development. That's mca-marines.org/professional development and get your reps and sets in. Hey, Scuttlebutt listeners, thank you again for joining us. I am Vic. I'm here with Nancy.
Hi, everyone.
And we're really excited to be bringing on our guests. This is one of the first times we have multiple guests, and this is the first time we have a husband-wife duo. So Jordan and Laura Green, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, this is really exciting. So I am a huge proponent for sustainable regenerative farming. In a past episode, I think it was about 2 years ago, we had another former Marine, Paul Grieve, who runs a chicken farm out in Temecula, California, east of San Diego. And this idea of what you guys are doing, especially when we look in the context of the larger food industry, it's really exciting. And then for you, obviously being a former Marine that just went straight from active duty into this world is also something I'm just so excited to be unpacking. So I really appreciate you guys taking time to be with us today. And I'm really excited to dive into like how this all got started. So exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Paul. He's a friend, and they're doing some great things there with Pasture Bird.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think he just got some farms out in Georgia as well. They're
Yes.
now selling not mass, but it's more accessible than like you don't have to be a member of the Dodgers to get some of that chicken.
Yeah, Pasture Bird was acquired by Purdue a couple of years ago, and so they are working on some really scaled applications. They're running shelters on pasture right now that hold 6,000 chickens each.
Yeah.
So they're doing some big stuff in the pastured poultry space.
Yeah, and his start it was really fun, basically based on Facebook post. But I want to dive into your guys' stories.
Yeah.
I think it's equally as engaging. But before we do that, so Jordan, Laura, you are former Marines, and Laura, I'm including you in this because there is no Marine spouse that hasn't earned the title Marine. I mean, deployments it's a two-person thing within a household, and so just want to dive into your guys' Marine Corps career. So Jordan, like, where are you from, and what led you to the Marine Corps?
Yeah, so I am from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. I'm a transplant to the area. I'm one of those Yankees, that moved down from the north when I was a kid. I was 14 years old when the family moved from upstate New York to the Shenandoah Valley. And so I was recruited into the Marine Corps out of the Shenandoah Valley. That would be the Charlottesville RS. A lot of good Marines come out of here, a lot of farm boys. And I joined the Corps in 03. I had already been, or I should say, enlisted in 03, shipped to boot camp in 04. I'd already been in the farming space for several years before that. And, us coming back to it after doing 5 years in the Corps was kind of a very natural thing. But that was where it all started, right here in Shenandoah County, Virginia.
That's also
Laura, what
how
about you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Texas, born and raised in Texas, definitely still have a love for Texas. But I fell in love with this handsome guy who came to Texas, and therefore we started chatting long distance. He lived everywhere else other than Texas, But the long story short is we became really good friends, got engaged and got married right before Jordan. Um, well, we were dating while he went through boot camp, and then got engaged right after he got done, and got married right as he was checking into his first base, which was down in South Carolina.
Nice. And so, Jordan, so you went, obviously, you did your recruit training at the PI. And then what was your MOS?
That was a 6257, which is airframes and hydraulics mechanic on F-18s. When you join, I'm sure as you know, for the enlisted side, when you join the Corps, you are joining for fields, not MOSs.
Mm-hmm.
And recruiters, sometimes fudge the margins a little bit on you on what exactly your contract is going to be. I had initially, yeah, a what? I had initially looked at joining the Marine Corps in 2001, right around 9/11 and thereafter. So that would have been 19 at that time. And I was raised in a very sheltered homeschool environment. In a way where this was homeschooling in the 80s and 90s, so there was really no transcription of academics or any of that going on. And so talking to recruiters in '01, they were basically like, look, we really can't touch you right now. It doesn't matter what your ASVAB scores are or any of that. At the time, DoD policy was homeschool graduates were treated as a tier 2 recruit, yep. So equivalent to like high school dropouts, basically. I think the number was 1 out of every 40 contracts could be a tier 2. So left it, at that time. Went and did a 1-year apprenticeship at Polyface Farms under Joel Salatin from later at '01 into '02. And in '03, DoD changed that policy. It's amazing how war changes DoD policy.
That's right.
Like, oh, we need these guys now. So I was back in Virginia at a buddy's at a wedding, and another friend of mine who was also homeschooled. He's like, hey, I'm going to boot camp. Do you want to go with me? Because I'd already done the ASVAB and all of that stuff previously. And it was like, what about this, DoD policy? He's like, oh, they changed that. We're good to go now. So I was the recruiter's dream, me walking back through that door, because it was a new recruiter. The old guy was gone. It was a new one. And I walk in, I'm like, yeah, I've already done all this. And I heard you change your policy. So let's go. And initially they offered me a counter intel contract, which I was not interested after talking with some guys who were in that field. I did not want to drive a desk. Like I wanted to be out and do stuff. So I switched from that to I wanted to be air crew on V-22 Ospreys. That sounded pretty cool to me. Yeah. The Ospreys were still a little rickety back in '03, '04. And they're like, well, we can't really get you an air crew spot, but in the Marine Corps you join for field, so just join under an air wing contract, and when you get to Pensacola, you can get that all sorted out. And I'd had a buddy in the Navy who had basically done the same thing. I was like, all right, well, it sounds like this happens, so they got me there. So go through boot camp, go through MCT, get to Pensacola in be like December of '04. And a hurricane had just gone through, so the base was just absolutely wrecked at the time. Like no one could stay on the first level of any of the barracks because they had all been flooded out. I think the Air Force guys were on hardship pay, because of the flooding, and that was at the point where we were like, well, no, you can't go air crew. You have to be on the maintenance side. And they don't even tell you what you're going to work on until you go through your A school at Pensacola. So it could be anything from C-130s, Harriers, F-18s, any of the platforms that the Marine Corps runs. So after getting through that is when I actually got my MOS to work on F-18s. And it turned out to be a pretty cool job. Did not have to fly the desk, which is what I didn't want to do. It's all a lot of outside stuff, a lot of real dynamic environments when you're on an aircraft carrier or on UDPs, getting around the aircraft. So from that perspective, it still ended up being mostly a lot of fun, even though it wasn't what I had precisely wanted to do.
Yeah, no, that's of all of the well, I mean, I guess there's many, but yeah, to work on that. I mean, also just the ability to see, I mean, kind of under the hood of what you know, at the time, these next generation sort of fighters and everything, and how like really that all works. I mean, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just sort of laughing too about your story with the recruiter. I was on recruiting duty of '03 to '05. And yeah, that idea of like, well, you can go into this field, and then because it's not a lie, it's like, oh, open contract, like yeah, you could totally still be whatever it is you want to be. The chances aren't amazing. You're probably going to be a grunt, but there is always the chance, like Dumb and Dumber, right? So you're saying there's a chance.
Well, that 03, 04 time frames, I'm sure infantry contracts were filling up just instantly. As soon as that fiscal year hit, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I want to go to Iraq and carry a machine gun." So those contracts were just gone, real fast.
Well, and I need to interrupt here and give a shout out for Pensacola. That's where I went to school, and early in my career, that's where I started my career at the Naval Aviation Museum. So love Pensacola. I was there when they stood up the NAT Center, Naval Aviation Technical Training Center. It was a big deal. How did you like your days in Pensacola?
I was not there for very long, so I came in after MCT, like classed up right away because they were trying to push a lot of people through. So I was in and out of there in like 8-9 weeks, I think. But it was great to spend the winter in the panhandle of Florida. There was a lot worse places that you could overwinter. Coming from doing MCT at Jacksonville in like November into December. That's some of the coldest I've ever been in my life. I did not know North Carolina could be that cold till you're digging holes in the woods out there at Camp Lejeune, and without any thermal gear or anything, and you're just freezing. So I was more than happy to go to Florida.
Nice.
And then Laura, so what was that like for you as Jordan? You guys, so you said like you essentially started dating. A lot of it was long distance, but you're sort of seeing this progression. You're all as at the same time your relationship is getting deeper. You guys are getting closer, and he's he's going through the initial phases of being a Marine, or an operational Marine. What was that like for you as you're seeing this? You're like, I know, what were some of your thoughts? Like, how was that all transpiring for you?
Yeah, for me, at that time, I was working myself, had, stuff going on in my world in Texas. And so it was definitely like, how when can we make phone conversations actually work, right?
Yeah.
When does that work, and what time zone are you in again? Kind of thing, because he was kind of jumping all over the place. And I was staying in the central time zone. So a little bit of a different relationship, I would say, in the way that we did long distance pretty much the entire time. I'd counted up at some point how many days did we actually see each other in person. So I always like to say we do extremes. It's either all or nothing, apparently. So we do a long distance relationship, and then with after he was fully in and we were married, we actually just squeaked in. We were married for, I think, 31 days before he left for his first deployment for 6-7 months. So we just squeaked it in there. And then it was like, well, what's the difference? We'll just go back to long distance, after getting married and him leaving again, long distance, right? But the cool thing is that definitely built a relationship that was on friendship and actually talking and getting to know each other, rather than, say, just hanging out and doing other things per se. So I would say that leads us into where as of today, we're business owners together. We work on the farm, and if you know anything about a farm, it means getting off the farm can be really difficult. Going on vacation, having days away can definitely be hard. And so we go from not seeing each other for 6-7 months at a time, seeing each other, not seeing each other, to moving to the farm and living every day in business and making sure we knock heads and keep each other straight, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
definitely got to through that whole process. 'Cause, it's the classic thing that young kid gets out of boot camp, and I was 23 when I went through boot camp, so I was the second oldest dude in the platoon. The only guy older than me was a guy who did 6 years in the Army and then came over to the Marine Corps. So you're like the grandpa of the platoons going through. But everywhere you go, all the NCOs and staff NCOs, once they hear you're, in a relationship and engaged, you can just see them rolling their eyes, and they're just like, "You are so stupid. Why are you doing this?" So, definitely had a lot of grief all the way through the process of. Fortunately, we knew each other before the Marine Corps, so it wasn't like you got out of boot camp, went down to the club in Savannah, and fell in love with someone there, and you're like, "We're getting married." We had we had a good relationship before the Marine Corps, and we're able to bring it through all of that. And it was coincidence that we got engaged on Christmas Day of '04. So I was at Pensacola, went to her place for Christmas. I got sent to C school in February of '05, and that's in between there was sandwiched some recruiter's assistance, so I could feel your pain there, Vic. That was like the worst 6 weeks of my entire Marine Corps career was doing that recruiter's assistance. Went to C school out at Lemoore, which is F-18 specific school. So that's really where you're narrowing down to your specific platforms and working on some jets out there. A RAG unit there, I think it's 101, the Navy unit. And that's when we set our wedding date. I didn't even know what squadron I was going to, whether it was Japan, West Coast Squadron, East Coast Squadron, and got through that school. Graduated number 2 at that school, so pretty much gave me whatever slot I wanted. So I went back to the East Coast to NCIS Beaufort and got there, checked into 312, BMFA 312, the fabulous checkerboards, and walked in there. In my service alphas, they're like, "Don't even unpack. We're leaving in 5 weeks to go to Japan." And I'm like, "Okay, can I get married first?" And they're like, "You idiots! What do you?"
If the Marine Corps wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one.
Yeah, oh yeah, that whole thing, like so much grief about that. But fortunately, they let me take 10 days of leave. So we got married. They wouldn't give us any days housing. For 5 weeks. So basically we had to camp out in the Days Inn right next to PI there for the first 5 weeks that we were married. And, basically I was like, all right, well, I'll see you next year. And, off we went on deployment, and Laura went back to Virginia to live with her sister. So it was a wild first year coming through the Marine Corps for sure.
Wow, Laura, it sounds like the Marine Corps really welcomed you with open arms, didn't they?
Absolutely.
You're like trying to carry her through over the threshold. Like, hold on, let me do the key card thing really quick, and then.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then just trying to get her, ID card and enrolled in TRICARE and all that before you. And I'm a new guy in the shop. I was the only new guy in my shop for 14 months. So there was a lot of a lot of things rolled downhill onto me and me alone.
Oh yeah.
As the new guy.
Yeah.
So
when
you deal with all. You deal with all that
company,
and trying to get settled. Yeah.
When I took my company, we were really NCO heavy as we were gearing up to go on deployment. So when we got our first, and I use this term colloquially, we got our first boot drop. Oh man, the NCOs were just salivating. They're like, no more working parties for corporals and sergeants.
Oh yeah, it's like sharks when you toss that gem in the water, man.
Yeah.
If I'm doing my math correctly, are you all coming up on your 20-year anniversary? Is that right? Did you say 2004?
In '05 is when we got married.
Oh,
so
05.
next
Okay,
year,
so
next year will be our 20th anniversary.
Yay! Congratulations,
Awesome.
you guys.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
awesome.
I want to back up just a little bit though, because I think one of the things that Laura had mentioned is one of the things that why I wanted you guys on together, and this is the idea. And trust me, I understand completely. My wife and I were just joking recently about how, because I think our sons were asking about when we got married and moved together and stuff. We're like, actually, when we got married, we didn't live together. um, and so. What was that like for you guys? And I'm not trying to like peel a scabs here, but it's just such a fascinating story about like you're living the Marine Corps life. You're deploying, you're going on UDPs. Obviously, training exercises take days at a time, and then all of a sudden, hey, let's become farmers, and it is day on, stay on. Um, you mentioned that being friends in your relationship was one of the things that definitely facilitated. But I mean, just what was that? I mean, that's a complete paradigm shift. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was just thinking how you don't know anything different. So, with us getting married and already having a long distance relationship, it was actually very weird to be together in person. And so in many ways, it's like, oh, well, we can do this. Like I had the confidence in knowing that just because he's going to be, I don't know whether he's doing 5 years, 20 years, 30 years, we didn't exactly know what the future held. But just knowing like, we can do a long distance relationship means that we can do this. Him being in the military, him doing his different stints and deployments and everything. I would say we knew we had that solid foundation and we can do it. We're definitely all in type of people. And so there wasn't really a question in my mind of whether or not, yeah, maybe a little crazy. I didn't really think we were. Looking back, I'm like, well, we've done some crazy things perhaps, but it
Yeah,
is
go
what it
hard or
is,
go
right?
home,
Like,
right? And then so for Jordan, you coming from a farming uh, background prior to your Marine Corps time, then like what were some of the things that you were expressing to Laura? Because Laura, you did not come from a
I
farming.
did.
Oh, you did also. Okay.
Hmm.
Oh, so this was something as you guys were encroaching on, like you were pretty familiar with what this lifestyle change was going to be like.
Yeah, yeah. Both of us kind of grew up on homestead, farmstead type of things where we were, raising animals and small family business. Um, for me, I actually joke that the Marine Corps is one of the easiest jobs I had. Aside from the, going on deployments and dealing more with the mental side of that. Um, I was used to working 14, 16 hours a day on a farm, 7 days a week, and dealing with weather and animals dying and all that. So you're kind of conditioned to that mindset of getting things done regardless of the elements. And the I joke about it, but when you're at boot camp, they have to give you 8 hours of sleep a night. So you always knew that there was a definite end to the day that they legally had to let you go to sleep. But things like 72s and 96s.
It's like
And,
libo. What's libo?
right, 30 days of paid vacation a year. I'd never had paid vacation in my life at all. So that stuff was a new experience coming into the military that, hey, we're going to work really hard when we are working, and we're going to do some dumb stuff, and the mental stress load is going to be very different than anything in the civilian side. But especially in the air wing side, hopefully nobody's shooting at you. You don't have to worry as much about that. It's more about getting your job done and the technical proficiency of what you do. And then you're going to have time off where you don't have to worry about the job at all. And that's very different than a farming lifestyle.
Sure.
So we had conversations probably a full 2 years before I got out about getting out and coming back to Virginia and starting a farm. And like Laura said, when we first got married, I didn't know if I was going to do a career out of it or not. That was kind of a push off till we get, till I get towards the end of my first enlistment and see if it's something that we want to go the distance. Because I think the silliest thing that you could do is do 2 enlistments and get out. Either do one and get out, or go the distance and get your retirement. But by about a year left on my contract, it was, we were 100% that I'm getting out and we're going to go back and start a farm.
Did you always know, this is for both of you growing up, since you both grew up in farm families, did you know always that this is a life that you eventually were going to go back to, or was there some reluctance? Did you have that kind of, once I get out of here, I'm never doing this again, I'm never going back, and then the being away from it showed you that, oh, wait a minute, that's where I really need to be?
So, my family has a family-owned business. They have a landscaping business, and then the farm was more like a homestead level thing, not a commercial farm.
Okay.
But I grew up in the outdoors. Was running chainsaws and equipment when I was like 12 years old, and OSHA violations left and right, I'm sure. But for me, I always enjoyed working in the outdoors, kind of being my own boss. Having something different every day. That was probably one of the harder things about being in the military for me, was, especially if you're on a carrier, it is the same exact thing every day. It is like a Groundhog Day experience. And that just really doesn't fit with my personality. Like I like to have something different going on and different challenges every day. So I knew kind of my idea of what I wanted to do with my life when I was, late teenager, 20, did revolve around, I want to do the Marine Corps for an undetermined amount of time. And then I want to come back and start a commercial farm business. So to take it from like what my parents had and the family had of just this little homestead, but actually turn it into a viable commercial enterprise that's a full-time vocation. And my joke was, hey, you can always start a farm when you're 40, but the Marine Corps ain't signing up anybody in their 40s. So, if you're going to scratch that itch, you got to do that pretty early in life. And, for me, 22, 23 was already like the clock was ticking.
Laura, what about you?
So my family growing up, we raised the animals that we needed for ourselves, maybe a little bit for friends. Definitely had a garden and canning and all of that good stuff. What we know now is everyone called homesteading. That was just the way of life for my family. And we also actually had a honey business that I grew up with, bottling, putting honey into bottles and riding in the truck to go and deliver to all the back doors of grocery stores and stocking the shelves. So that's more my viewpoint of growing up with business, is fulfillment of orders and getting orders and filling them and delivery. So in many ways, and then I ended up going on to working at a grocery store for 2 years in my teenager years. And so with that, for me, I definitely grew up butchering chickens and milking cows and moving the animals and doing everything that we're doing. I definitely, for me personally, it didn't necessarily matter which direction we were going to go. I was along the ride to support whichever direction that Jordan really wanted to go, whether it was staying in the Marine Corps, being a farmer, doing something totally different. I'm somebody who am going to find meaning and happiness wherever life takes me. And it wasn't, oh, I don't ever want to do that, or, oh, I really, really want to do this. I kind of am more neutral in that bigger picture.
Wow, if we could bottle that up and sell it, we could go into business and make millions, because that's an attitude that is lacking, I think. But that's a different podcast episode. It sounds to me like the two of you have the perfect complementary skills to be doing what you're doing now.
Well, I mean, it's worked out so far.
So let's talk about what skill sets those are. So, I mean, we mentioned a little bit early, with Paul Grieve and everything he's got going on. this style of farming. One of the things that I found so compelling about what you guys are doing is that you have all of these hyperlinks on your website and like it's almost, you know, in the Marine Corps, we're talking now a lot about tactics and what the, you know, 21st century battlefield is going to look like and the characteristics of war. Information driven, obviously information operations is a massive thing now. Data centricity, all these sorts of things. You guys seem to have adopted a lot of that in your sort of farming ethos, if that's even the right really term to use. But like, you have a data centric model. Like, you're not just out there going for the big feels. Like, you seem uh, uh, to have your farming being driven by stuff out there. Now, I don't know, and what I would like for you to go into this, but like, is this something that you just knew good farming and now that you have data to back it up, or was the data something that pushed you guys towards this style of farming? And I guess maybe talk about your style of farming too, so our listeners are familiar with what it is you guys do.
Right. I guess I'll start with this, and then if you want to hop in on it, Laura. For those who don't know, our farm, as J&L Green Farm, we are a direct-to-retail pasture-based livestock farm. So it means all the animals that we produce, we're using production models that are putting animals back into something closer to mimicking a natural habitat to what they would have been in millennia ago, to what their wild cousin species are. And then we are directly retailing all of the meat that is produced from that model directly to the end customer, or maybe to like a farm stand that is then selling it to a customer. So it's breaking out of a commodified, vertically integrated agricultural system that is the predominant force in the United States, where the actual farmer who is taking care of the animals in many cases today does not even own the animals at all. He doesn't own the animals. He doesn't own the feed. He certainly doesn't own access to the market. All he is a caretaker for those animals and the guy who is paying the mortgage on the building those animals are being raised in. And it's a very feudal system that you are entirely bound to the whims of the integrator that has your contract. That if you don't do what they say with your poultry house or your hog house or your egg laying house, they will pull your contract. You will have no animals and you can't pay your mortgage. You will be bankrupt. So there's multiple things that we were looking at, and this goes even back before the Marine Corps when I was doing the apprenticeship at Polyface Farm with Joel Salatin, and then reading books before that. There was this growing movement that had a duality to it. One being, hey, as farmers, we need to take back control of market access. It doesn't work anymore for us to just have a contract with a big chicken company or for us to take our animals to the livestock auction. Those are no longer stable and profitable venues for revenue to come into a farm business. And then the other side of that growing, which is now called the regenerative movement, was the ecological side of saying, all right, looking at the way that livestock is being done today, it's increasing the virility of pathogens and viruses because of the management practices and the way that these animals are being raised. It's causing environmental degradation with pollution runoff, groundwater contamination. There's something wrong with that production model, largely due to the scale at which it is now applied. It's one thing to have 100 chickens in a shed on your farm. It's another thing when you have 100,000 chickens in a shed on your farm. And that's where commodified agriculture has gone to, just a continued road of concentration and size and scale to these operations that is becoming both ecologically unsound and, for the actual farmer and operator himself, a very risky proposition from a business perspective. So those were kind of the two sides of the context that led us and a lot of people like us to say, all right, we're going to strip away all of this very capital intensive infrastructure We're not going to spend millions of dollars in building chicken houses to raise chickens. We're going to do a seasonal model where we put them back on pasture, where we have the minimum shelter necessary for them to be taken care of, and we're going to recapture that market access to the customer. Your average commodity farmer now is getting something like 15 to 17 cents on the retail dollar. We want to push that all the way back to we're getting 100% of the retail dollar. And obviously we have we have partner businesses that we have to pay expenses to, so that's not all going in our pockets, but we are controlling our access to the market. We are pricing our product where it needs to be for us. And then, there's the work of what Laura and her team do of actually marketing and selling the product. And, is it something that the market will bear? But at least we as business owners are sitting in the driver's seat of the business, and we are not, really at the mercy of a lot of other big corporations that do not have our best interest at heart. And that's the synopsis of where a lot of the regenerative ag movement is, and for us particularly, why we got into doing it this way.
Yeah, it seems like the current model, and I don't mean to, because I'm such an outside looking in, so I don't want to be overly critical, but I will say, and all of the PCS moves, all of the time, because I'm from California, live here in Virginia, so I mean, I'm still driving cross country even out of uniform, and basically when you go from essentially like Tennessee to Colorado, there's just nut to butt cows, man. Like, and I just feel so awful because these things clearly don't have the space to move. Now, I don't know if that's just how it goes, like that time of day that they're resting. This is sort of what they prefer. But it just, it almost seems like you can walk on the backs of these things for miles. And it just doesn't seem like that's good for anything. And I think what you're talking about, and then to hear then that the current model at the large scale is almost like bond servants. I mean, 17 cents. That ain't right. So I really applaud.
We all scratch our heads like, oh, why are there less farmers? Why is the average farmer age like 67, 68? And it's because, and why are the only people who are getting into farming now is more of a huge scale corporate type of structure. The small independent farm of, let's say under 1,000 acres, under 10 million in revenue a year. Those are dying out extremely rapidly because you cannot be competitive in that big system. There's a reason that they're putting 50,000 cows in a feedlot is because it's very efficient. You're bringing in train loads of grain. You have all the millions of dollars of equipment that you need in one spot to do it. And we're in a I love history and studying, military history. I was huge with that as a kid, big Civil War nerd. But in agricultural history, we are in a very brief window of an extreme abnormality that right now we can afford to expend 13 calories of energy for every 1 calorie of food that's produced because we're a very petroleum dependent agricultural system. What we're doing now could not have been done 150 years ago, and it probably won't be done 150 years in the future or 200 years whenever the oil is largely used up or is very expensive. But we're in this brief period in the context of Earth's history where we can throw 13 sticks of firewood on the fire for every 1 stick worth of food we get out, and so we're burning down resources far quicker than they're being regenerated or cycled through an ecological system. So it gives this artificially cheap feeling to what food is. In the United States, we spend like 11% of our income on food. That is historically so far out of the norm that is not even funny.
Yeah, and again, like I don't mean to poo-poo the system or those who are unfortunately caught in it because the demand signal is there, and so the market is just meeting the demand, and people want their food now, and they want a lot of it. But at the same time, and they don't like, it's sort of almost that thing, like, tell me the time, not how the watch is made. But knowing literally from the ground, like from the soil and up, is so important, because as we were talking about, as much of your income as you're spending on food, you want to make sure that it's got the nutrients that you need, that you're not just like throwing in empty calories and then essentially wasting your money, because now I have to buy more food to get the same nutrient level and to get the same health benefits that I would from, a quarter of what's going on there, right?
Well, I'm sure you've seen those charts of the nutritional comparisons between like produce from the 1950s to what it is now, or meats from then to what it is now. You have to eat like 6 times more carrots to get the same vitamin A or what have you. And it's so easy to fall into a normalcy bias that we you can't blame the market for wanting cheap food. I mean that is market forces at work, and people are struggling. You don't want them to have to pay 3 times more for their food. But I think we also have to step back and realize that we are only like this right now because we are rapidly expending the resources that took millions of years to accrue. That topsoil loss, it takes 1,000 years to build an inch of topsoil, and poor tillage practices have wiped out feet worth of topsoil from the Midwest. That's going to take a long time to rebuild. And what does it look like when that topsoil runs out, when cheap oil runs out, when all of our herbicides that we have are no longer effective? You're already seeing that now with herbicide resistant weeds, when all of our antibiotics are no longer effective, yeah. That you have antibiotic resistant pathogens, which is already happening. We're at the very beginning stages of the consequences of our last 80 years of agricultural policy coming to fruition. And what we're saying, and other people like us are saying, is while there's still time for us to start changing, let's not be forced into having to change overnight. Let's start to do this of our own volition now. And I'm so thankful for the customers who support farms like us, because you're already subsidizing the commodity commercialized agricultural system through your taxes, and how money is directed that way. And then you're going above and beyond that to actually pay a full price for a regenerative production model, which inherently is going to be more expensive than an exploitative one.
Right. So
I think.
Oh, go ahead, Nancy. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say. So we were talking. I was in preparation for this interview. I was talking at our family dinner the other night, and my dad was over visiting, and he's from the upper Midwest, northern Wisconsin. That's also where I grew up, and just north of the farming community, because we were way far up north. But dairy farms and farming and family farms were just a way of life there in his youth and in my growing up. And I can remember when I was a kid being driven to the farm where my parents were purchasing the other half of a cow that, I think my grandmother was purchasing her half, and it was going to, it was a smaller family run enterprise. This whole long story that I'm going on and on with. The point is, I don't know that people today are as connected to where their food really comes from and what that means. I mean, meat doesn't come in a package, I think we've gotten very disconnected from where we get our food and the people who provide it for us. And I think that is part of what fuels what you're talking about, this rapid use of resources in order to come up with an end product.
Yeah, it's like Joel Salatin says, that a lot of people don't realize that dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets is not a muscle group. that we're so disconnected from how food actually is grown. And there's a lot of cliches out there about why are you killing animals, just go buy meat at the store. But I think there's a growing awareness of there's something wrong with our food system, and there's a lot of ways that you can measure that. You can look at just obesity rates in a population. That is not a normal thing to occur. That's giving you a feedback loop that something wrong
Yeah, well, even
upstream
within that
of
too,
what's
like
going on.
even within that, that obesity levels, when you look at it, they're also malnourished.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Your body is telling you to eat because it's undernourished on key nutrients, and you are in the process eating a lot of a lot of carbs, a lot of sugars, a lot of preservatives, a lot of food dyes, and all things that supposedly have been demonstrated to be safe through FDA testing and things. And maybe in and of each individual component it's okay, but what happens when you smash all of these things together? That you have, historically, humans would consume about 2 pounds of sugar a year, and now it's over like 100 pounds of sugar a year, and we wonder why diabetes is going through the roof. So I think it's hard to make black and white statements about any one thing. That yes, the current industrial food model is why there's 8 billion people on the planet. It's done what it was designed to do very well, which is to produce high levels of very cheap food. And really, a lot of it kicked in after World War II, that the United States had to feed the world. Europe was destroyed. A lot of Asia was destroyed. The only untouched infrastructure industrialized nation was the United States, and we had to carry the load for a couple decades while everyone got their feet back underneath them, and that job was done to a high level of excellence. But now, we don't have huge continents of devastation. We have spot conflicts here and there that are causing issues, but there has to be a comprehensive overhaul of what is a sound ecological food system for the environment, for the humans that are eating it, for the animals that are being produced, and the crops that are being produced, where we're not in this fight or flight mode anymore, that we can start to balance out the ecological checkbook, so to speak. And that's something we need to be doing now.
Yeah. And Laura, what are you seeing on your end? Because Jordan mentioned that you do the marketing team and delivery. What is the sort of demand signal you're seeing on there? And are you seeing a shift where people want to know about their food and to make sure that they're not sort of contributing to unethical treatments?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the majority of people who choose to buy from us on a regular basis, and kind of bring us in as part of their family, right? Their farm family. Um, I see it as they come to us for potentially three different reasons. One is definitely on the side of um, the environment and the animal welfare and what all is going on there. They're coming at it because of the health and wanting to get just good, clean, wholesome food on their table, and just seeing how what we eat is affecting our bodies. Um, and I combined the two with the animal side of it and then the environmental side of it. So those three things all wrapped together. I I definitely see customers. They're very um, educated, generally speaking, on this side, and also that is one of the reasons that we lead with education on our website. You were talking about all these different hyperlinks and things going on, and bringing in the information, because ultimately you need to be informed as a purchaser what is going on with your food. Um, Unfortunately, I don't know half the farms, well, basically all of the farms, right? When I walk into a grocery store and purchase this stuff, I really don't know what's going on. So our job is to be transparent. Our job is to give education and let you know what all is going on. And then you get to decide, do I want to spend my dollars in this way? Do I want to get um, this food? And sometimes it has to be a contrast of what is conventional doing, what are we doing, and how is that different? Because there is a lack of transparency that is happening in the conventional farming world, because it's not very, it's not a pretty picture to put up there a feed lot of beef, of what you were talking about before. So we're not going to put that on the side of a truck or on a carton of milk or, something, right? We're going to put this one cow in the middle of a pasture with a red barn in the back and say, this is where, the milk is coming from, right? But the actual picture is very, very different for that commodity meat or milk or eggs or what have you. And so there's a lot of information, there's a lot of different sources coming in. And so trying to filter through it all can be very confusing. And what I want to bring is clarity and education, information to you as easy as possible, and let you make the decision. Where do you want to spend your money? Where do you want to make an impact?
My eyes were opened several years ago. I won't name any names, but I have a close family member, my daughter, who worked for the Department of Agriculture, and she was in food safety and information. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say all that, but anyway, she's not with them anymore. But what she taught me about what is actually happening in terms of animal welfare was shocking. And that's when I personally made a switch to only purchasing from, I have a very specific place where I purchase because I only purchase kosher meat. And I found a supplier, they ship it to me, but they only work with small family owned farms local to where they are. Um, it was a little bit startling, some of the things my daughter was telling me about what she learned, and after her job with agriculture, she no longer eats meat just because she was so um, disturbed by what she learned about mainstream farming.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say majority of consumers would no longer eat conventional meat if they only knew. And unfortunately, that has been disconnected, and it's kind of been, the privacy fence has been put up. And you have the toxic keep out in front of majority of these farms now, instead of, welcome in, come see what we're doing. So
Yeah.
I would say your story is not the only story. And what's been actually cool to see with our farm and with our customers' stories and journeys is the fact that we've had people come to our farm who have chosen to eat vegetarian because of just knowing how conventional is treating the animals, right? The animal welfare. And they've come, done a tour, and by the end they decide to buy their first package of meat and actually eat meat again, because they could get behind how they were being treated. um, and that's not the only person, right? There's been other people who have talked about how they were eating this way, they landed, with having cancer, and they really wanted to use food as their guide back to health. um, and so I have several customers who have found us because of their health journeys, and just bringing back to
That's
health.
awesome.
Yeah.
And how has
That must feel really good.
Yeah, how
Sorry,
has
Vic.
that been received? Because obviously, again, I'm just sort of speaking in generalities, but it seems to me when you have this Jordan referenced this pseudo feudal system, that something like you, especially at the grassroots level, you and others like you who are completely changing the paradigm, how is that being met? Like, are there farmers coming to you? I know, and I'm definitely referencing Farm Builder here, that are wanting to get out of that feudal system, or are people trying to undermine you so that you're not pulling customers? Like, what is the environment looking like? That is it combative? Are they still ignoring you? Are they changing because of what you guys are doing?
It's kind of all the above. I would say the majority of people who are getting into regenerative agriculture are first generation, like we are. That you're not carrying. Like here's a term from the F-18 community: legacy cost. that you're not carrying all this legacy infrastructure that is from a bygone era, but we're still having to pay for it and service this infrastructure model. That was one of our biggest advantages being first generation farmers, is having that fresh look and that fresh start, that we're not having to still pay on the $8 million mortgage that mom and dad did 20 years ago to put in say a rotary milking parlor for a dairy. If you have something like that in the family legacy, you are locked into that system. Like, you have to milk the cows so that you can pay for the mortgage for the infrastructure that takes care of the cows, and it turns into this vicious cycle that becomes really hard to break out of. There are, farm families that have been doing it for a long time that are embracing the regenerative approach. A good example of that at a big scale would be a farm in Georgia called White Oak Pastures, that they were a commodity farm for 150 years. And they have switched over to being like a grass-fed, grass-based, cattle farm, direct to retail and all of that. So my personal position is I'm not trying to convert anybody with telling them to their face that what they're doing is wrong. That never gets you anywhere. I'm sure, as you know, as an officer, when you're trying to persuade the guy above you to let you do something with your company, it's not going to go very far if you go up and smack him in the face. So it's lead by example, show what we're doing, be transparent with what we're doing, and then also not be judgy around all of our neighbors. Almost all of our neighbors are commodity farmers, and I'm not going over there and telling them what's up with how they're doing it. Just have those conversations, and it's long-term relationships, and working that angle of how can we help support them become more profitable in their farm. Like a lot of farms around us now are selling us their cows at a very specific point that we buy. And, instead of them having to take them to the auction and get whatever is being paid that day, they can now work with us. And I'll say, hey, I will give you a fair price of this for what you have. And maybe letting them exercise that muscle of taking back some of their marketing decisions and pricing power a little bit, and try to show them the way. That's kind of been our approach, is we're not going to flail around and rage against them. As people, we will talk about the principles and maybe the system that we're caught in, but I'm certainly not calling any farmer who is engaged in industrial scale livestock or commodity agriculture a bad person. They're just like all of us. You're caught in a system that is far bigger and very slow turning, and it's that aircraft carrier. You're not going to turn it on a dime. All you can do is keep your little corner clean.
And then, so is that the impetus behind Farm Builder then? Like, was this, I mean, obviously as an NCO, the mentorship piece is just intrinsic in the job. Like, as you move up like you mentioned, Marine Corps leadership isn't based on, because I outrank you, you must do this. Obviously that's there, but that's the worst kind of leadership.
Right.
So you were doing mentorship all the time. You come from a farming background. Is that where Farm Builder came from then? Is that I want to share this? Or are you trying to create a more grassroots sort of thing? And talk a little bit about Farm Builder.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can accomplish both things with the same effort. Certainly that being in the Marine Corps, once you move out of the E3 mafia, you are into more of a training role where you're still doing a lot of work, especially in the aviation community. Your corporals and sergeants are really the backbone of the aviation community. But you're bringing those young guys along and saying, hey, you need to be taking these tools out of my hands when we're doing this. You can't just go out there with your tough book and figure out how to replace this $1 million component on your first time without someone being there saying, oh no, don't do that, do this. And so there's a lot of years of just training the new guys and exercising that patience, and also slapping them in the butt a little bit if they need to be, to get the job done right. And for me, that's something I'm very passionate about and enjoy, is seeing people succeed in what they're attempting to do and not flailing about. And we saw that over and over again in the farm community. When we got back to Virginia in '09 and started our farm, other people are asking questions that very common set of questions, kind of ubiquitous across all the newbies, and then seeing this high failure rate that startup farms have a 90% failure rate or something like that. And that put a burden on our hearts of, hey, how can we help these other people who are trying to start, because we don't want to fail. Certainly for us, it really sucked for them to fail too. If we could throw them that life jacket, and just say, hey man, you just gotta do this. You gotta have a little course correction here and you'll be good. That led into starting Farm Builder as a social media type of thing. Like, all right, what can we do for free to help people? Well, we can start community. We can start a YouTube channel. Initially with YouTube, it was like, I'm getting all of these questions all the time. It would be great if I just had a YouTube link that I could just say, all right, you want to know how to do pastured pigs or whatever, here, go watch this video. Instead of having to go 30-minute phone call with every person who wants to know. And from there, it's grown as kind of a side business. Like, our farm is our main deal, but Farm Builder is this passion project of a mentoring, educational consultancy type of business where we can have pertinent and relevant information for scaled application of these production models at whatever level someone wants to explore it. If they just want to stay at the free level, hey, you can be in a Facebook group, you can do YouTube. If you want to be at like a little bit more of a weekly call-in level, we have something for that we call Farm Builder Live, to where you can actually hire us to come out to your farm if you want. So, whatever level you would like to engage with us, we're trying to develop systems to be available in that way, to give this true information, no BS, kind of stripped down factual bullet points of, all right, instead of having, I'm sure you guys have watched a YouTube video on something particular topic you want to get educated on, and you got to wade through the first 15 minutes of fluff to actually get to the meat of the thing, because they're just padding out the runtime for the algorithm and monetization and all that. It was like, all right, we want to stay real focused on the information and the effectiveness of it and why, and not pad it out with these other things. And I think that's really resonated with a lot of people, that they know they can come to what we're doing and get an answer to a question that isn't trying to throw a bunch of smoke in their eyes at the same time.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And then Laura, how about you? What sort of things did you see, as you guys have been doing this for a minute now, from your end of it, for those folks who maybe are interested in doing a startup farm, and then also as you as a military spouse, like what kind of tips or tricks, little life hacks do you have as far as making that transition from active duty over to your next journey?
I would say stay like be sure that you don't have any set plans and that this is what you have to do.
Semper Gumby.
Stay flexible, because you never know what your year, what your day, what your next hour is going to throw at you, and being able to stay flexible, and just keep your head in the game. There's a lot of mindsets that actually have to shift and change. When it comes to being an entrepreneur and running your own business, and just thinking through all of that, there's quite a bit that really has to change in order to own your own business. I would have to say, versus you go to work, you get told what to do. Well, when you are the boss, how are you time managing yourself? If you've always had someone else tell you, you always know, oh, I need to be at work at 9. Well, that's them time managing you. But how are you going to effectively time manage yourself? That's probably the number one thing that I coach people on, is with time management and just the flow of your day and efficiency, is really, I feel like, a big key. So even if that looks like let me just say this, before you had kids, like when you got married, you didn't have kids, or as a single person, you thought your life was busy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was an
Um,
idiot.
and then you get married and you're like, oh, okay. And then you have your first child. And then it's like, oh, now my life is busy, right? Well, then you kind of laugh back when you only just had one child. And now you have two children, and then you have three children. And then, every step of the way, it's like, oh, we started a business. Well, it was busy, right? Well, now we have, not just one child and starting business. Now we have three children and continuing to build a business, right? And so I love the fact that life gives you stair steps, because if you were thrown in the middle, I think about where we are, and I wear 1,000 hats, I feel like, but it's doable, right? Like you can keep your head above water because you've taken the time to grow yourself into the position that you are actually operating out of. And so it gets to, if you will take the time to grow and establish yourself, then I feel like you'll get to enjoy the position that you get yourself in down the road, right? Because where are you headed, and where do you want to be?
Yeah, the
That's a
biggest
really
thing
good
that's got
perspective.
to go is, yeah, the biggest thing that's got to go, being Marines, we're very used to the term hurry up and wait. That we're there super early and then we're sitting around for 6 hours waiting to be told what to do. That notion has to go out the window. When you're starting a business for yourself, there is no hurry up and wait. There is cover and move. You are either covering for someone else or you yourself are moving, and it's got to be like that. Throughout your day, to be effective and actually make it work. So there's one little nitpick I would have from veterans who have worked for us, or other guys who are coming out of the military. That's the one thing that's got to go. Is there's no longer the smoking and joking and hanging out with the boys in the smoke pit for 45-minute breaks. That's gone. You gotta move.
Man, that was my bread and butter.
I think that's why half the guys in the military smoke, is just so they can get out of stuff and
I
hit the
used to
smoke
say
pit.
that all the time. I'm like, I was like, you gotta stop giving the smokers the 10 minutes off, because now our entire platoon is gonna be smokers.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, guys, we've taken up way too much of your time. I so appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. One thing I did want to touch on, if you want to just take a few minutes, is you just released your 2024 event dates. Any key events you want to highlight for people who maybe are coming in or interested in what you're doing, folks that are in the Northern Virginia area?
Definitely come out and join us. The guided farm tours. We have an open door policy. Of course, you can come to the farm and walk around, and we can point you in the right direction. But truly, there's so much value in not just eating this food, but actually seeing the difference. And our customers, the ones that truly support us, it really started with a farm tour. It really started with them choosing to take the next step, to come out to the farm, to actually see what's going on and get a little bit more plugged in. Um, Really important. I feel like definitely something that would surprise you for the things that you see on our farm, and listen to what all is going on and what's getting invested into the high quality meat that we're raising. So I would I would definitely encourage. We have a homeschool tour date happening, and then two other um, all ages families are welcome. For the other two, we have a morning one and an evening one. Come out, see what we're all about. Don't let just social media paint the picture for you, but come see it for yourself.
Amen to that, for sure.
Yeah, I'm coming out there. Consider it
Awesome.
happening, because I want to come and see. I'm excited to see the farm.
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
Awesome.
Well, guys, this has been so great. For those who want to check it out, go to jlgreenfarm.com. For those who are interested in getting involved in this or having the greens taking life nuggets from the greens, go to Farm Builder, excuse me, .us. We'll put those in the show description so everybody can come check you guys out. Thank you so much for being here. And then, you'll be seeing some egg orders coming from the Rubel house here very shortly. So thank you guys for everything you do. Thank you for being with us. I think this is very important, regardless of what side of the aisle that you're standing on. I mean, this is like you said, this is something that 100 years from now could be a matter of what we're doing as a species, not just from what we put in our stomachs, but what we're doing to the stuff around us. So thank you for everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not an us versus them thing. It's the whole one team, one fight thing. And just being on board with where it's at and having those discussions, I think is the important part. But thank you so much for having us. It's been great to hang out with you guys.
Yeah. Hurrah, Semper Fi.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
The Marine Corps requires leaders of all ranks to have a deep understanding of war and the employment of force. MCDP 1 reminds Marines that the military profession is a thinking profession. Every Marine is expected to be a student of the art and science of war. It goes on to say that every Marine has an individual responsibility to study the profession of arms. Self-directed study in the art and science of war is at least equal in importance to maintaining physical condition and should receive at least equal time. The Marine Corps Association understands the critical importance of ensuring that Marines are as mentally ready for combat as they are physically ready. That is why we offer an entire page dedicated to wargaming on our website. We have recommendations for both tabletop board games as well as computer games. And for Marine Corps Association members, there is a discount code for wargame design studios that you can find on the website. Wargames are a great way to immerse yourself in history and to put yourself in the shoes of the great leaders of history. Go beyond guided instruction and experience the thrill of wargaming. Check us out at mca-marines.org/decision-making-exercises/wargaming-2. That's mca-marines.org/decision-making-exercises/wargaming-2. Take your training to the next level. Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Litchman, and or William Treating, and Jordan and Laura Green. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.